Hello to the chicos and the chicas. Welcome back to the recap video of round 8 from the candidates. Decisive games were seen, which is always good to see, especially given that all the wins were mostly piled up by Nepo and Fabi. So there were actually quite a number of players, and still there are quite a number of players in the field who haven't won a single game. So it is quite a unique contest and competition in this regard. So yeah, it was good to see the number of decisive games. Rapport, yes baby. But today on the menu is the American encounter, Hikaru against Fabiano Caruana. Let's have a look at what happened between the two American titans, Ruy Lopez, and even in the Ruy Lopez, we are going to have a look at the Open Ruy Lopez, which is actually a childhood love of mine. If you will, I used to play this with Black a fair bit. And actually, I also used to play the so-called Dilworth attack, which is this bishop c5 move. Note that here, bishop e7 is mainline theory, knight c5 is mainline theory, and even after bishop c5, knight d2 castles, and bishop c2, not only is knight takes f2 mainline theory, which is actually the Dilworth attack, but we also have f5 and bishop f5, and all of these have been known to theory for ages. Kasparov analyzes an absolutely mind-boggling game in my great predecessors about the f5 knight b3 line, which was a Reshevsky game where black had like 4 connected pass pawns for a rook. I really highly recommend you to check it out if you can. But nowadays the rage is again this knight takes f2 variation. However, theory has actually evolved, surprise surprise, quite a bit even in this variation, in that f6 actually no, it's not, f6 used to be the old main line, and even here after knight f1 we would actually transition into the Caruana game. The old main line used to be, in my time, ef6, and then after bishop takes, king takes, then queen takes f6, and theory started here. And back in my youth, about 55 years ago, no, not quite, but yeah, so back in my youth, this line was actually popularized by the vicious attacker, outstanding chess author, and just all-around awesome dude, Artur Yusupov. He was the one who made a living on the black side of it, and he had an awesome game against Nigel Short. That was really a reference game for many of us who play this opening on the black side. However, in the 20th century, and in particular in the past 5 years, a new variation arose, partly as a result of Magnus Carlsen's reign and his clever ideas, which was to sack the pawn on e5 in order to accelerate the development of the minor pieces. And actually Carlsen recently scored a beautiful victory against none other than Mamedyarov. And so now this is the new rage in the Ruy Lopez Dilworth attack, and that is exactly what the Hikaru Caruana game delivered to us. And so I was very curious to see where they will take the theoretical battle. And apparently Hiki was very well prepared, and he did talk about it in his recap video that he prepared for this line the night before. So that was a really good guess by him that he could get a open Ruy Lopez. And something particularly curious happened, because as we are playing out these very logical and still known theoretical moves, knight a5, queen f2, knight b7, rook e1, and c5, here bishop g5 was the initial plan of Hikaru's, and then he got things mixed up and he eventually ended up playing knight g3, which gets 2 question marks from the engine, which I think, even now, having seen everything and having known a few things about the 2 moves, I think is not right. I don't think that this move deserves a double question mark. I think it's utter bollocks. And the reason why this move gets a double question mark, and this is how sometimes the engine can get funny, is because you don't get a double question mark, and a lot of amateur players, by the way, misunderstand the double question marks they often get. It's not a blunder per se because it's a bad move. The engine labels it as a blunder because you missed a much better move. And so comparatively to the much better move, everything else is gonna get 2 question marks because you didn't play the best moves. But of course the engine doesn't tell you this, which is yet another trap of the engine, using the engine when you know, you are lower ranked on the ladder. Now, the idea was to play bishop g5, and I did some investigation yesterday on stream and tried to figure out what was going on here. And apparently there is a very curious forcing line that goes with take, pull the bishop back, take on a2. Now bishop b1 is threatened to get a new queen, rook a1 and bishop b1. Now everyone suspected that Fabi prepped something in this line, and actually the evaluation of the engine drops from 1.5 to 0.8 by this stage. And I can easily imagine that if you feed this to the most monstrous engine in the world and leave it on for a day, it will take it to a forced draw. But right now, as I'm looking at it, my engine shows 1.5. And yeah, that seems to me to be too big of an edge for an engine to turn around on it. But needless to say that it's definitely a very tricky business to try to win a position like this, where your rook is entirely tuned in. Note the idea with queen g6 is that if takes, then rook takes f3 is quite pesky and annoying, and if queen takes here, rook f7, and this seems to be a rather evenish position where this rook is never gonna see the light of day. Anyway, so Hikaru mouse slipped with knight g3, bishop d3, queen d2, and c4, and Hikaru labeled this move as a positional mistake or error, because now it is very difficult for black to move either central pawns. And optimally in this structure, what you want to do is to move these pawns en masse. So it's not only one of them, but you want them to roll forward and sweep everything in the way. And that's exactly what now is not going to happen. And in fact, the whole game is just a perfect textbook, marvelous example of the theme of blockade. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Rook d7, super logical. The rook is coming across to f7 to create chaos on the f-file. And this is probably the game of the move, or rather the move of the game, where Hikaru managed to neutralize this pressure on the f-file with the spectacular knight h1, which actually virtually forces me to quote the very witty Anish Giri, who took a screenshot of this position and said, when you play a game of chess, you've got 64 squares, use them all. And boy, right you are. Knight h1, and the plan is to regroup with bishop here, knight f2, and white will have an absolutely marvelous position. So e4 is forced, but this leads to this extremely rigid and unpleasant structure for black, where the pawns now have no natural way of progressing, and the bishop's diagonal backwards is shut down on both ends, rendering this bishop useless. The only use of the bishop is to keep this mate threat alive, but once white deals with this mate threat on f1, this bishop becomes an overgrown pawn. Knight d4, queen g6, h4, an absolutely insane move by Hikaru again, and virtually the only move that retains a notable advantage for white. The idea is to kick the queen and then occupy this diagonal, because there are so many delicious squares for this bishop to go to on that diagonal that we really want to get there. Knight c5, h5, queen d6, bishop g4, and now already the engine claims that white is completely winning. And you can clearly see that once again the pawns are just rigid and blockaded, the f5 threats have been dealt with, and the black minor pieces are really useless. Queen e3, slow and steady wins the race. Bishop e3 next, and if check, we just go to h2. Queen f4, take, knight e6, perfect chess. Bishop e6 was good too here, by the way, and in fact the engine slightly prefers this. And after bishop takes d5, this is basically just a matter of technique, as they like to say, on top level. You might feel that this is even materially because rook pawn versus 2 minor pieces, but the reality is that the 2 bishops are immensely powerful, and the d3 bishop is still an absolute curse of a piece for black. Rook f5, bishop c6, takes. Now that was a little bit unfortunate, but losing h5 is not really relevant, because as soon as white manages to win one of these pawns, most likely a6, the majority on this side of the board is gonna be the decisive factor. Bishop d4, rook f5, knight f2. Marvelous to watch how Hikaru utilizes the light squares and how he keeps on jumping to and fro to optimize piece placement. Just divine stuff. Absolutely awesome. b4, now takes would be met by takes when once again white has the potential to create a passer, whereas upon not retaking, now this is a fixed weakness. He had bishop e8 here, by the way. He said in his recap, I think, something along the lines of, yeah, I don't even recall. There was a piece sack variation where he thought that black would have a chance to hold, but I don't think that was particularly worrisome. Bishop e3, rook a1, recreating the new threat. And here, actually, this was a blunder, according to Hikaru, who said that he needed to play first something to stop h3, but I don't recall now how he did it. I think knight h3 perhaps first. Or bishop c6 even. Anyway, this allowed h3, which is quite a clever motif. I have to say, this is really, really clever. And the idea is that if you take the, with the knight, then all of a sudden check takes, king here, rook here, and this pawn becomes a major pain. So that capture is not possible. And if we take with the pawn, then after rook f3, we have a very awkward double threat. And if rook e1, then check, king takes, and rook takes. And f2 hangs, and again, we are in trouble. So in the end, Hikaru ended up just ignoring the threat, allowing this trade. But even here, the blockade stands so firm. Look at the beauty of the cooperation of the white pieces. Rook f3 not possible, rook h5 not possible. f4 square is unavailable, so bishop g4, king g2, king g3. And it's just such a natural progression, the way how the white pieces are coming up. And black can do absolutely nothing but watch the pawns fall one after the next. Insane stuff. Yep. Beautiful piece pile up again by Hikaru. Yeah, I just can't help but admire the really awesome cooperation of the pieces. It is just next level stuff. Like, look at from this utter passivity that you see here with bishop back here, bishop knight here, bishop here. They don't particularly look anything aggressive, and yet nothing was to be done to go from zero to hero and look like this. And the black position did not improve whatsoever in the process, and now the white pieces are dominating the board and material is falling every step of the way. And now it is just a matter of taste, really, how one finishes the business. And Hikaru finishes in style, dominating once again all the central squares, forcing this trade. And then after e3, king e5 was a very neat adjustment. So the idea is that if they play e2, you can come back with bishop f2, and the knight is neatly guarded. So there was a bit of an awkward fifth rank pile up that needed to be taken care of. Bishop f2, rook back, bishop e1, just to be safe. Let's blockade the pawn. And now, after coming back, all Hikaru needed to do was to relocate this knight, preferably to a square from where we can attack either this or this. King f2 may or may not have been necessary, but I think it keeps things clean. His idea was actually to come back all the way with the knight to blockade here, then release the bishop, replace with the knight, and then you can go after the bishop. And whilst doing this, this is also hanging. King e3, back, knight e3, as mentioned, and now it is just really all over Red Rover because of the knight g2 plan plays out to perfection. Bishop f2, and again, gradually, the white pieces will take command and threaten the black pawns in a way that is not going to be manageable for black. This is a good time to resign, basically. For the next, at upteenth time, I'm going to relocate again my pieces. This is falling. Knight d4 is on. The position is just dead lost. Knight d4, bishop d3, rook e5, and finally, we piled up on the pawns. And after king f6, knight f3, Fabi decided to throw in the towel. G5 is dropping. Once I take this, I will come back for this one. Bishop D4. I pick off this one as well. And yeah, this is just utterly unplayable. A marvelous demonstration by Hikaru. And again, I can't help but say that his technique, especially in the endgame, was just absolutely flawless. Despite the fact that there was a blunder there, according to his own measure, where he missed h3. This idea, this should have been something that he avoided. But even that, and what he did after, was just begging for a placement in any textbook. And really, this opened up the tournament in a different way, because now the gap is greater between Fabi and Nepo. It has grown into a full point. But Hikaru winning another 2 games all of a sudden makes him the next chaser, or the chaser behind Nepo. And knowing that Nepo winning the tournament is likely going to lead to an unprecedented situation where the reigning world champion might opt not to play. Who knows what's going to happen then? So Hikaru is in this contest now, really and truly. So the rest of the tournament is promising to be just as exciting as it has been so far. So stay tuned, and I will be back with a new video tomorrow as well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, to sub, to comment, and to super like, and I will see you tomorrow.